Good morning, everybody. Oops. Okay, all right. Sorry. You think I'd remember that I have to turn off my microphone in order to turn on this microphone, but I forget about those things. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to JJPOC April meeting, and I'm excited to be here today. This is kind of a blend here. I know this is really awkward. Like I'm back here, there's no screen over there, but I'll talk. We'll make sure it's not. Most of the eyes aren't looking this way. They're going to be looking down there. So yeah. So this is just the bad part of it. When at this part of the year, a lot of the big rooms are already occupied for committee purposes because the session ends in a few weeks. Yay! So their room they get the choice of the rooms in order to complete their business. So that is what we're doing today. Today's very well expected, anticipated, desired meeting about our women. This is something that we have all wanted, and I'm so excited that we did get a committee that looked at the data, that asked for the data, that connected the data, that looked at where the starting points are that we need to look at and things that we need to drive home for our women here in Connecticut. And I say women, I mean, they're girls, but it's a gender issue and a very big gender issue. And I'm glad that we're taking it on. So I look forward to everything that we talk about and hope that we get a lot of good feedback and a lot of opportunities for us to continue. I'm looking at my minutes. Do I have to accept the minutes or something?
Yes, if we can accept the minutes of March. It was just a big summary, a snapshot of what happened. As you all know, you may recall, we just had our Youth Justice Day focused on career pathways. And so it's really just a big picture summary.
And I want to say that was amazing. JJPOC. I really thoroughly enjoyed it more than because watching the kids at that time, the kids' faces, listening and looking at the commissioners and seeing they are just like me. I thought that was one of the most telling things that I saw in their eyes, and it made me feel really good about what we do and how we make reality for our children that they can do whatever they want, and we're here to help you. So with that, the minutes, I have a motion to accept whatever the paragraph. It's been moved, and I get a second. Can I get a second? Yeah, and it's been seconded. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? No, the minutes have been accepted. All right, Erica, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. And yes, Representative Walker, as you said, this is a longstanding request that came to the JJPOC a few years back now. I want to say back in 2024, and very excited to welcome not only our partners here in the state of Connecticut, but also welcome some of our partners who are outside of the state of Connecticut. And I'm very appreciative for them to join us virtually, and we will get to that part of the business soon. But first, I want to give the floor to Namanje Wali, our Senior Project Manager for the JJPOC, who will do a just big picture administrative oversight. This is something that we've been doing in not only in this committee, but at the Children's Behavioral Health Policy and Planning Committee. We want to keep you informed. We want to keep you informed of what's happening in all the work groups and all the work that you are all doing, plus the work that will be coming in front of you in a few months. So Namanje will do a run through of the administrative slides. Thank you.
All right. So our April 10th
I'm going to
meeting,
make you do something. Please say your name and if you have a title, because there are people out there that don't know everybody here. So I forgot to say that. So I apologize. Go right ahead.
No problem. Good morning, y'all. My name is Namanje Wali. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the JJPOC at the Child Youth Justice Institute. Coming up, we have our JJPOC meeting today, which is our April 10th meeting. Next, we have our education work group meeting, which meets on May 18th. That will focus on legislative updates. Following that, we have our CEW meeting, which is our community expertise work group. That will be also on April 7th. which will feature legislative process training. So we'll be able to give our folks an update or an overview on what to expect and how to really engage with storytelling. Following that, we have our CADS work group, which is our cross-agency data sharing work group, which will feature a few presentations on crossover youth. Our diversion work group meets on May 12th, as well as our incarceration work group will meet on April 20th. Any questions that y'all have, we ask that you reach out to Erica or myself or Andrew.
Thank you. This next part of the agenda, I want to welcome several of our panelists to the floor, and would like to ask Charmise as well as Judge O'Dowd to provide us a welcoming remarks as to and level set with and setting the stage with what the work was charged to the incarceration work group on the gender responsive landscape analysis.
Thank you, Erica. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to the gender
Is
responsive
your microphone on?
presentation. It is,
Oh, okay.
but I'm going to speak up
Yeah.
today.
I need outside voices, please. Thank you.
So let me start by saying that this work group, the Gender Response Work Group, is possible because of our collective recognition of the importance of fostering inclusivity, equity, and meaningful dialogue around gender responsive practices and services in our state. For recognizing that girls and boys may have different needs and that our juvenile justice system should work for all of them. So thank you to everyone here. Thank you to the JJPOC, and Madam Chair Walker, thank you so much to you for allowing this group to form and this wonderful work to go forward. So at the time of the forming, what we were seeing in the juvenile justice system was that girls were in need of help. And the question was, what kind of help? Where is the help that they need? Who delivers the assistance? Who is doing what now overall? And what does it look like? What is the landscape? And how do we get these girls out of the systems involved cycle and into stability? And that's where JJPOC and the Gender Responsive Work Group and other wonderful community partners came in to help. So I want to start by giving a little bit of background and highlighting the responsibilities of the Gender Responsive Subcommittee. And the Gender Responsive Subcommittee started as an endeavor between JJPOC and the TIP Council together to look at the needs of young women, recognizing that trafficking was something that we were seeing as a system of what the girls were going through, and just continued vulnerability and compounded trauma. And we started to look at it. We thought it would be a good idea to look at it together. So in 2024, the Gender Responsive Subcommittee was tasked with creating a few big projects, but really, really good and needed pieces. So it was the landscape analysis and gap assessment. It was a human trafficking data framework that was looking at collecting, reporting, and distributing data on human trafficking. It was a policy and legislative recommendations where the recommendations would be provided to both JJPOC and TIP. And in a collaborative way. And the recommendations would focus on improving the continuum of care for the girls and gender impacted youth. And then fourth, there was information sharing. And the subcommittee was tasked with sharing information with the Transforming Children's Behavioral Health Policy and Planning Committee. Big pieces. And the way to start looking at those big pieces, as you could probably imagine, is to look at them one at a time. So this landscape analysis is the first step to look at the first piece so that the Gender Responsive Work Group can then continue its collaborative efforts to look at future pieces and to make solid policy recommendations that are based on not just the wants of one person, but the wants of a group, that's based on data, that's based on information, that's based on collaboration. And we're proud of that. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to my co-chair, who I have to take a moment and thank and say thank you for for being steady through this process. It was a long road to get here, but it was so worth it. And we both agree that it's not always easy or quick to do the work the right way, but it is very worth it. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Judge Wynn O'Dowd.
Thank you, Attorney Wolcott. So
losing my voice, but I am going to try to use my outside voice today the best that I can. I want to echo the comments from Charmise, who's been a wonderful co-chair, and for that introduction with regards to how we arrived here today with the legislative mandates for the Gender Responsiveness Subcommittee. Some of you might be asking, well, why are Charmise and I here when the pamphlet says that we're co-chairs of the incarceration work group? To answer that question, it begins with what the purpose of the incarceration work group is, which is to ensure systems and facilities are responsive to the developmental needs of the youth and provide programming for youth to thrive and be successful in life. In responding to the needs of the youth, that also includes the question of how we as a juvenile justice system was being gender responsive. Rather than having two separate work groups examining this issue, last fall, the Gender Responsiveness Work Group that was then chaired by Representative Gilchrist, Dr. Sukhmani Singh from UConn, and Cheyenne Higgs at CSSD, rather than having two separate subcommittees, we folded in the Gender Responsiveness Work Group into the Incarceration Work Group. So Gender Responsiveness is now a subcommittee of Incarceration Work Group so that we could consolidate and streamline information. But we found out that there was a lot of overlap and we were doing much of the same work. That work went into today's landscape analysis. And Charmise and I would be remiss in not recognizing that a large part of that groundwork for that landscape analysis was done from the original work group with Rep. Gilchrist, Cheyenne Higgs, and Dr. Singh. We would also like to recognize their commitment to ensuring that the tasks that were set out in Connecticut General Statutes 46B 121N were completed at that time and continue to be completed well, because their insight has been invaluable with regards to the product that you're about to see today. In addition, it is not unnoticed the collaboration between the various state agencies, CSSD, the Department of Corrections, the Department of Children and Families, as well as our community providers, Love 146 and the Center for Children's Advocacy. And if we missed anyone, it was not intentional. So please forgive us if we didn't name you specifically. Their input goes well beyond the data that you're about to see in the presentation. It is their expertise in the juvenile justice and child welfare systems that made possible the landscape analysis that we're going to go through today. And then the panel will have an opportunity to comment on that as well. So without further delay, what everyone's been waiting for is the actual presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Okay, before we turn it over to Ryan, in front of you, some of you may have some fact sheets in front of you. There's some index cards. If you wouldn't mind, this will help to also level set what Ryan is about to report on. And so I'm just going to go through the front row first, second row, and then the last row. Just take a couple of minutes. Should be an index card. It has one side question, the other side has the answer. And if you wouldn't mind, your name, please, your agency, and don't forget to turn the button on your microphone and put the microphone next to you. Can you please read those facts?
Good morning. I'm Deputy Warden Jennifer Page from York Correctional Institution. And the question I have is, gender responsiveness is trauma informed. Why is this important to consider when a girl interacts with the juvenile justice system? Many behaviors exhibited by girls that result in arrest or school suspension are evidence of abuse and trauma.
Good morning, I'm Christina Villatoro, and I'm the Youth Residential Area Director for Community Solutions Incorporated. Girls make up, true or false, girls make up a much higher percentage of those incarcerated for lower offenses. And that is true.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Bernardi Guzman, and I am the founder and CEO and chair of Reentry Solutions CT Inc. And I'm also somebody that is formerly incarcerated for 23 years, so I can tell you the answer to this question is 100% true. How does incarceration of Black girls compare to that of white girls? Black girls are disproportionately incarcerated at over 3 times the rate of white girls.
Okay, I got it this time. Good morning. My name is Cheyenne Higgs. I'm an adult probation officer with the judicial branch. I'm also the co-chair of the TAL Gender Responsiveness Subcommittee. My question is, how has the number of incarcerated women in the United States changed since 1980? I'm sure you will not guess this. The number has increased by 600% between 1980 and 2023.
Good morning. I'm Christina Guillo. I'm the acting child advocate at the Office of the Child Advocate. Why are mental health resources critical for juvenile justice involved girls? Roughly 75% of girls in juvenile detention meet the criteria for at least one mental health disorder, with some studies showing up to 81%.
Good morning. Deputy Commissioner Charles Hughes from the State Department of Ed. True or false? White girls are incarcerated at a higher rate than Indigenous girls. False. Indigenous girls are incarcerated 4 times more than white girls, having the highest incarceration rate.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Hunt. I'm the Director of Juvenile Probation at the Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division. And my question is, what racial group is vastly overrepresented in the child welfare system? The answer is Indigenous girls. Thank you.
Good morning. Bill Mulligan, Deputy Commissioner of Operations and Rehabilitative Services for the Department of Corrections. How do juvenile justice involved girls' mental health needs differ from that of their male counterparts? Studies have found that girls in the juvenile justice system have greater mental health needs than boys.
Good morning, Sharonda Carlos, Deputy Commissioner of Administration for the Department of Correction. My question, is it common for girls in the juvenile justice system to have a history of sexual and physical abuse? The answer, yes. 3 in 4 girls in the juvenile justice system have a history of sexual and physical abuse.
Good morning. My name's Tony Walker, State Rep from New Haven. How many American girls are projected to experience some form of sexual violence before the age of 18? 1 in 4.
Good morning, State Representative Nolan. True or false? Adolescent boys are at greater risk of running away compared to adolescent girls. Know that one. False. Adolescent girls are at greater risk of running away compared to adolescent boys, mostly because of victimization, I think, too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And now I'm going to give the floor to Ryan, our Provost Assistant at the TAL Youth Justice Institute, at the University of New Haven. Ryan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Connick. I am the Provost Assistant at the TAL Youth Justice Institute, and I have been the lead developer on the Gender Responsive Landscape Analysis. I want to take a moment and thank all of our partners at the Department of Children and Families, the Department of Corrections, the Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division, and everyone else who has had a role in the development of this report. It has been a long time coming, and I am very, very proud and happy to see this day finally come. So, next slide. So in 2024, Public Act 24-139 was enacted into law, which charged the JJPOC, specifically the Gender Responsive Work Group, to develop a landscape analysis that meets 7 provisions. 1, to define gender responsive and gender responsive practices, receive and consider input from youth, families, and communities directly impacted by any gaps in this work, review national best practices, including approaches and types of services provided and system considerations, review previous work and legislation, identify any gaps in this work, review existing work and practices on gender responsiveness throughout the state, and review a data profile of the girls that are currently in the state systems. I'm going to put a little asterisk next to number 2. We'll come back to that. For best practices and the process that went through this report is the result of months of collaboration with the state agencies and community partners, and the incarceration work group, the gender responsive subgroup, and many key stakeholders, which again, I thank for their efforts on making this a possibility. Next slide. Gender responsiveness is defined as a multidimensional strengths-based approach based on theoretical perspectives that consider girls' pathways into different systems. Essentially, gender responsiveness is acknowledging that girls enter systems in a different manner than boys do, and they take different paths into the system. And it's important to take that into consideration when treating them, because just their needs aren't the same as boys, and therefore their treatment won't be the same. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention outlines 5 suggestions for gender-responsive programs. Programs should be female, all female whenever possible. Girls should be treated in the least restrictive environment whenever possible. Programs should be close to the girls' home to incorporate family relationships. Programs should be consistent with female development, and they should address the needs of parenting and pregnant teens. As for the process and best practices, so gender responsive programs and practices should be culturally responsive, focus on relationships, prioritize safety, take a skills-based and strength-based approach, and take a holistic approach. Part of this landscape analysis was to compare efforts in Connecticut that were gender responsive in the past to how the state looks currently. And about 20 years ago, in the early 2000s, Connecticut was considered a leader in gender responsive work. It became integrated as and ingrained into the systems of how to best treat girls and care for them and meet their needs. And since then, efforts have waned a little. Gender responsiveness is more of an initiative now. So there's different programs that are systems related, but there's a gap between then and now. Next slide. Trafficking. So trafficking, as our co-chairs of the incarceration work group mentioned, trafficking is an issue with girls specifically. According to DCF's Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team, or HART. Girls are the primary recipients of trafficking reports and consultations, with over 230 consults being made in 2025 alone. 94% of identified human trafficking victims in the greater Hartford region between 22 and 24 were female, according to the Regionalized Human Trafficking Recovering Task Force of the greater Hartford region, and that's the greater Hartford region alone. Of those victims, of those 94%, 84% were minors between the ages of 13 and 17 years old. And human trafficking reports have increased 200% since 2022. This slide might be difficult to see online, but they're highlighted in different colors for a reason. So these are all of the existing works and practices throughout the state based on state agency and the community partnership. I've listed them out, but I've also color-coded them because it can be misleading at times. When you see this long list, you think we're really doing a great job. And in some aspects we are, but I also have color-coded these slides so in green, you can see all of the programs that are available to boys and girls. The titles that are in purple are available to youth that identify as LGBTQ+ or any other minority group. And then you can go to the next slide. I won't go through all of these. And then blue are the programs that are specific to only girls. And I might have missed some, just there are a lot of programs and community partners in Connecticut, but these were the major ones that we came across. So there is a gap. The data. So this data was collected from the Department of Corrections, Department of Children and Families, and the Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division. They were all tasked with a data grab. So across calendar years 22, 23, and 24, the majority of youth in DCF foster care were girls. Neglect was the most common reason for home removal by DCF for both boys and girls as of 2024, with sexual and physical abuse together making up 11.5% of all removal of girls, which is greater than that of boys, which was at about 6.2%. In 2024, the highest rate of rearrest was for 15-year-olds. Non-Hispanic Black girls made up 43.6% of all court referrals involving girls in 2024. The most common PREDICT risk level, PREDICT is the risk assessment used by the judicial branch. These risk levels for girls with a disposition of probation with placement or supervision was Tier 3 at 72.2%. 309 girls were identified as being dually involved, meaning that they were involved at some point in the child welfare system and the juvenile justice system, the majority of them being non-Hispanic Black girls. Of these girls, the most common PREDICT risk level was level 3. The most common need of girls, as identified by the PREDICT assessment, was mental health at 52.3% of girls being above the needs threshold. New Haven had the greatest number of dually involved girls in 2024. Across calendar years 22, 23, and 24, more girls with DCF involvement were admitted to detention centers on multiple occasions compared to those without DCF involvement. All girls admitted to York Correctional Institution between 22 and 24 were all unsentenced with a mean length of stay of 56 days, the length of stay ranging from 0 days to 228. Of the 279 girls in DCF care who were found eligible for special education services, 41.6% were identified as having an emotional disability. The Manchester area office was identified as having the largest percentage of emotional disability and learning disability diagnoses out of the state. Girls who identified as Hispanic or Latino comprised the majority of the cohort with any diagnosed disability. In fiscal year 2024, 53.2% of the pretrial juvenile detention population was identified as having potential intellectual concerns, which was an increase from fiscal year 2023. Looking forward, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a little asterisk next to number 2. We are in the process of incorporating youth voices as a phase 2 to this report in a collaboration with the Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division and the Department of Children and Families. There is a survey that is in development and that will be administered to girls voluntarily by their respective agencies. And this data will be given to the Tau Youth Justice Institute, de-identified and as secondary data to better understand the girls' perspectives and opinions and feelings about their experiences. So stay tuned. We intend to have this released in fall of this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We can open up to questions now, or would you like to go to the panel next?
If there are any questions, let's ask them now.
Okay.
And
there any
not
questions?
move on.
Okay. Any questions on the report? Yes, go ahead. Martha.
Martha Stone, Center for Children's Advocacy. Thank you for your report. I noticed in one of the requirements of the Public Act, it was to include the voices of families and communities directly impacted in addition to the youth. And you didn't really address that. I'm wondering how you're planning to address that requirement.
Yes, thank you, Martha. That aspect of it is still in development, but we absolutely will include communities and the families. We just haven't developed a game plan for that just yet.
Charmise?
Yeah, and let me just add on, Martha, that's probably one of the biggest pieces, right? And so we looked at this in 2 phases. This landscape analysis, part 1 is recognizing what are the systems we have in place right now? What does our current response for female youth look like in the state of Connecticut? That is what's covered here. The second piece is, what do the girls that are moving through either both systems, what are they saying that they need? And that's a survey responses. That is the going out and getting that youth voice. But it's also important to get the voice of the families who are looking at these girls from the outside and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing, and the community. So that whole, all those voices is going to be incorporated into phase 2. Once we have that, we can then sit down around the table and start to create recommendations. And that's what I was talking about when I said that collaboration is long and it may take a while, but the final process is going to be so much better. So this is still in progress.
And also I would like to add one of the things that as we are preparing for this next phase 2, we already know that we have the collaboration and partnership with the Judicial Branch Court Support Services and the Department of Children and Families to capture the voices of the girls in the system. One of the tasks that my team will be doing in the next, starting immediately, Brian, thank you, and Namanje, is that we are going to sort of do a scan of those programs that Ryan identified in the green, I believe, or the blue, and identified of those specific programs that work solely with individuals that identify as females. And that would be part of the working with them in collaboration and identifying the community voice, the family voice, right? Because we need to tap into those programs. We need the access to them. We need them to voluntarily, be able to participate in this next phase and help us to construct a set of recommendations that will come forward to you that are that speak to what they need to help them.
I want to sort of piggyback off of that, that identification. First of all, fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This, I hope, leads to many, many more conversations, many more. I plan on making sure that all my colleagues get a copy of this report. I think it might also require having a meeting with legislators to explain it, especially once they see it. But the other part is, what are the agencies doing to address it? How are you doing? What programs are you starting to emphasize now from as you gather this information? How are you exercising it? And what are the things that you are having difficulty with so that we can try and address it? It's collaboration. And the only thing we can do is communicate with each other to try and help each other over those mountains and peaks that seem to be obstructive in addressing these needs. And I also would like to thank the girls for being honest and telling us their story. Again, they are the ones who are being victimized. They are the ones who are suffering, and they are the ones who really deserve the applaud for coming up and saying what they want, because it's a lot easier hiding and pretending it doesn't exist. And then it manifests into other things. So for them, this is a long journey. And I hope that we're going to be aiding them in that journey, as opposed to standing back and saying, we don't want to know about what you said because we don't want to cross that line. We're going to cross the line. Good therapy crosses the line. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, we're going to move over to introduction of our panelists. I'll do a very brief bio introduction. All of you should have received the packet as well and the link to their sites if you'd like to learn more about them. And I want to thank some of our panelists are joining us via Zoom. So when you get called, if you wouldn't mind making sure your camera is on and you're off mute. So first, I'd like to introduce no stranger to Connecticut and just a great person that we've worked with in the past and continues to work here in Connecticut. Dr. Stephanie Covington is an international recognized clinician, author, and organizational consultant and lecturer. She is pioneer in addiction, trauma, and recovery. Dr. Covington developed an innovative, gender-responsive, and trauma-informed approach that delivers effective services in public, private, and institutional settings. She has provided technical support to Connecticut to improve gender-responsive services statewide, including helping them to create a trauma-informed system. She continues to consult with Connecticut Women's Consortium. Dr. Covington, would you like to just say hello?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Following is Dr. Emily Salisbury. Dr. Emily Salisbury is an associate professor of social work and the director of the Utah Criminal Justice Center at the University of Utah. She serves as a commissioner for the Council of Criminal Justice Women's Justice Commission. Dr. Salisbury is the co-creator and research director of the Women's Risk Needs Assessment, and the only peer-reviewed validated risk and strength instruments in the public domain designed specifically for justice-involved women. Connecticut has since implemented the Women's Risk Needs Assessment tool in an adult criminal justice setting. Dr. Salisbury? Would you mind saying hello?
Hello there. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Next here physically with us is Tracy Guzman. She is the founder, chair, and CEO of Reentry Solutions, which supports individuals reentering society by connecting them with communities and resources. She also serves as a reentry case manager at the Waterbury Reentry Welcome Center, is an ACLU Smart Justice Leader, a Connecticut Hall of Change Grade 8 inductee, and brings lived experience to her work. She has played a significant role in reforming laws aimed at ending mass incarceration. Tracy.
Good morning again, everyone.
Thank you. Next will be Camila Tugues, is the lead juvenile probation officer for the gender responsive unit of the Judicial Branch Court Support Services, where she serves as the Juvenile Probation Officer Trainee Academy Coordinator. She addresses the specialized needs of girls, including trauma, human trafficking, special education advocacy, family mediation, and girls group facilitation. She also has direct experience working with justice-involved youth and their families.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. And lastly, Cristina Villatoro is a Youth Residential Area Director of Community Solutions, Inc. She previously served as Program Director for a transitional independent living facility for adolescent females in the care of the Connecticut Department of Children and Families. Christina is a certified trainer in Dr. Stephanie Covington's Voices curriculum and TIER, the Trauma-Informed Effective Reinforcement Model. She also provides quality assurance and technical assistance to maintain program fidelity. Christina.
Good morning again, everybody. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Okay, and now we will get started. First question will be to you, Dr. Stephanie Covington. From a national lens, how would you characterize the current state of gender responsiveness in systems serving justice-involved youth? Where are we seeing meaningful progress, and where are we seeing the most critical gaps?
Well, I think as was mentioned earlier, this whole concept about being gender responsive has a history of 20, 25 years, and actually a rich history in Connecticut. But what we're seeing nationally is that the federal cuts, financial cuts, have had a trickle-down effect on states and cities. And that combined with their funding cuts for youth and their, what would be the best word to use, their basic refusal to even use the word gender, let alone how it's coupled with gender identity, is having a huge impact on services. And so in various places, I see people having really good intentions, wanting to do this work, but having difficulties with funding and being at really the will of people in legislative office. And I think actually Connecticut can look at your own history of what you used to have and where you are and what happened. And that's exactly what's being mirrored across the federal system. Where we see people doing, I think, the best work is where the agencies that are working with youth are working together. Unfortunately, in many states and many places, they're siloed. People think that these are my girls or these are our girls, versus very often the young women, those who identify as female, are in multiple systems and they need to be working together. And that's where we see the most effective work taking place.
Thank you so much for that. And one more question, as you brought up the multiple systems, where are some systems making meaningful progress in gender responsiveness, and where are they falling short? What distinguishes systems that are truly gender responsive from those that are only using the language?
Well, we know people using language is easy, right? We're trauma-informed, we're evidence-based, we're gender responsive. And then when you really look, that's not what you see. Programs that are really gender responsive also are very focused on trauma. Because just as your statistics that were being read and mentioned, how many girls have been impacted. So places that are gender responsive are also trauma-informed. I would say the other thing that I've noted, well, and let me just say a bit more about that. I thought that in reading your landscape, I was surprised there wasn't more about trauma in your landscape. When you were giving the profile of the girls, when you're talking about the connection of trauma to mental health, to educational challenges, to behavior, I was curious about that. Because our trauma work has to be on 3 levels. One level is trauma informed, and that's language everybody's using, and that's education. So we want staff trained, we want administrators trained. Next level is trauma responsive, is how do we take what we know and use it as the lens to look at our policies and practices? And that's the part that people usually jump over and don't do. And the third level is trauma specific, where we're actually providing services that are appropriate for girls. When we look at girls in multiple systems, I think one of the important things to think about, girls who are in DCF and in juvenile justice have usually had very little adult support, parental support. And so relationships are key. How do we provide girls with relationships, pure relationships and adult relationships that they can count on? And people who are doing that are usually being more effective.
Thank you. And we'll be back to ask Dr. Covington a few more questions. Second, we will turn over to identification and assessment. And as Dr. Covington was mentioning about sort of the multiple systems of education, the behavioral health system, the trauma experience, identification is critical to ensure that we know, what is it that, what are the girls coming with? So Dr. Salisbury, would love to bring you into the conversation. How can assessment tools and assessment process better reflect the realities girls face, for example, exploitation, family dynamics, and mental health?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I think the most important piece here is to stop framing the assessment of girls around the concept of risk. So one of the iron laws that we have in criminology, one of those things that we know is absolutely true, study after study, is that the best predictor of crime and delinquency is actually a person's sex. Girls are not nearly as likely to commit delinquent acts, nor as nearly as likely to be violent, and yet our systems operate oftentimes as if they are. So framing every system decision around the concept of risk for recidivism actually masks the true driver of their behavior, as Dr. Covington mentioned, of course, in the landscape analysis, which is trauma. So this is especially harmful for girls of color, particularly Black and Indigenous girls, who are often perceived as less in need of care and held to a higher standard of responsibility for their behavior. And quite frankly, given the amount of sexual violence that many of these girls have experienced, it's actually quite astonishing that they aren't more violent. I'd like to also mention too that as somebody who's created a women's risk need assessment tool specifically on the adult side, I oftentimes get asked to build a risk assessment tool designed for girls. And I say the same thing every time. I'm not willing to do it because it, quite frankly, isn't fair to the girls to continue framing the conversation around risk. My colleague Lindsay Belisle and I wrote a research paper on this in 2021 where we argued that risk should be reframed to resilience. If we were to create an assessment tool that truly starts with girls in mind, it's essential to recognize girls' unique strengths, especially pertaining to their individual gendered, racial, and cultural identities. So in my view, we need to stop seeing kids as a constellation of risk factors to decrease or resolve, but more on capability to confront life's obstacles and find out what kind of bounce back a youth has and how do we help improve and increase that level of resilience.
Thank you so much. And with that, how do we help the youth build that level of resilience? There is an assessment tool, right, that is critical to have as we are interacting with our young girls in the system. But part of, a tool is a tool is a tool. What's also very critical is, and you mentioned this, or I think it was Dr. Covington mentioned, training of our staff. And so if our staff, are utilizing the correct validated and normed tools for our girls, there is another process to that assessment or screening and assessment process, and that is building trust, which then can help to build resiliency. So Dr. Salisbury, how can staff build trust more effectively during the assessment process?
Yeah, great question. So again, for the Women's Risk Need Assessment tool, as an example, right, we have a certification process for end user interviewers whereby they can't get certified if they don't demonstrate trauma-informed interviewing skills and really person-centered assessment. So that means really putting the client at the forefront of the conversation and that it is a conversation, not just a method to collect information and data. So interviewers need to ask themselves, are they actually doing the assessment to build rapport, or are they doing it just to collect data? And the answer, of course, should be both, but with the rapport building being most primary. To create safety and trust means that we have to expect that girls and individuals are not going to trust us at the outset. And because it's not safe to trust individuals and systems that have continuously harmed them. So really, we need to allow girls to tell their story and to share their narrative safely, because usually no one else has asked them in a caring way, in a safe way. And that becomes really just crucial. At the end of the day, we need to listen.
Dr. Salisbury, this question was not on your list, but you just made me think of this especially when myself and I'll just name Kim Savaji here, we're doing some of the work at the Judicial Branch Court Support Services in implementing the gender responsive model, not only in the juvenile justice system, but in the adult system, along with multiple systems. One of the things that we talked a lot about was vicarious trauma. And so when you mentioned, certification of staff when it comes to this process of assessment and also the process of engaging in the case management work and the interventions, and hearing the lived experiences of these young girls and, the trauma that they experience, the sexual violence, the exploitation, all of that, how can systems support their staff as they are hearing these stories day in and day out? How can we reduce the vicarious trauma that our staff are hearing? I used to say at Judicial Branch Court Support Services, if we can't take care of our staff will not be able to take care of our clients.
Yeah.
And so what would you recommend, especially in those assessment moments and you're building those trusts with these clients, with these girls? How do we protect also and care for our staff?
Yeah, thank you for the question again, really important. As we have continued, of course, to do this work nationally, it's important to know that, the amount of vicarious trauma is just crucial to really think about. And one of the things I oftentimes help systems consider when they're about to or want the training around the women's risk need assessment is to help that system executive leadership understand what they're about to get into. If you're going to talk about trauma and victimization and be trauma informed and trauma responsive with the clients and with the youth that you serve, you had better be trauma informed and trauma responsive with your staff. And that oftentimes is a missed opportunity that we see in systems that aren't thinking about the implementation strategy. A lot of times agencies just want the training, give me the training. Training doesn't change culture. Training won't change the well-being of your staff. That takes incredible amounts of leadership and a strategy for well-being. And there are lots of different models out there that we can start to talk about, maybe on a separate call, about the ways in which we can, of course, support staff. But even with the women's risk need assessment, I tell people, look, this assessment tool, everybody says they think it takes longer to do, but it doesn't. It takes the same amount of time that most other risk assessment tools take. It feels like it takes longer because of the amount of depth and the amount of information, the difficult information that we're receiving. And so I advise that nobody do any more than 2 in a day and never back to back, right? Helping our staff understand that their baseline of where they are in terms of their regulation needs to be constantly at a lower level. And if they're up here at a 7 as opposed to a 2, if we're talking about a scale of 0 to 10, that 7 is actually going to facilitate so many different difficult decisions and drive not effective, unproductive behavior, of course, in the workplace. And so I do think and agree that we need to have more conversation about focusing on the resilience of staff too. Interestingly, the last thing I'll mention is that Dr. Covington and I co-created a mobile health app specifically designed for the well-being of justice-involved women around social determinants of health. And I've had a lot of staff ask me, hey, I think I need something like this too. It's essentially around understanding the different needs around well-being, and that it's not just how much you move and what you put in your body, but your spirituality, your financial health, your emotional health, and so on.
Thank you so much. And we will be back with Dr. Salisbury. We'll move over now to Christina, and we'll start talking about behavioral health and treatment. A good segue into that. And as we saw in the report, we saw that, many of our girls are sort of some of the highest rate in the sense of recidivism back into detention, specifically girls that are duly involved in the system. And so what does a safe and supportive residential program environment look like for girls?
So I always love this question. I always love talking about this too. And oftentimes in the copious amounts of programs that I've been in over my career and over the years, they think, okay, we're creating a program for girls. Let's throw some pink or purple on the walls with some butterflies. And it's like, okay, all right, I see where you're going with this, but it's so much more than that. When we are providing a safe and supportive residential program, it isn't where the girls are being watched. It's not necessarily the color of the wall, and that does play into everything. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's a place where they're known, valued, and protected in every single sense of the word. Dr. Salisbury actually took the words right out of my mouth, and something that I personally live by is, are they able to tell their story? There's so many times, more than not, where I'd have girls come into the program. I'd get the referral, I'd look through the referral, and I really encourage my program directors now to do this. Take a look at what you need to, get the information that you need to, but let them tell their story. Every single time I'd say to one of the girls who came in, all right, listen, I'm going to put all this paperwork over here. Tell me, what happened? How did you get here? Walk me through your life. The shock that comes on their face just for the ability to have a voice in who it is that they are is sometimes emotionally overwhelming to me. And there have been so many times where, for those of you who know me, I might get a little emotional about everything. It really does touch you because you can realize for the first time somebody is giving them a safe place to tell us who they are. So safety isn't just physical. And I think this is where we really miss a lot, and where we're thinking about program safety and support. Obviously, we want to do health, risk, and safety, always going to be paramount, but it's also emotional. It's relational. Especially working with girls, we have to remember that relational component. It's that feeling that, you know what, I can let down my guard. It's coming from consistency. Consistency absolutely creates that safe place. It's showing up every single day, no matter what, and where our responses are rooted from. Are we being calm? Are we being compassionate? Are we being curious? And it's not about the control. Especially for our girls who've experienced so much trauma, that safety can also be a place where they can explore their identity. Again, give them a voice. And how does it they're respected and not judged? So when we are thinking all in all of that safe and supportive environment, it really comes down to those little things. And I'm a person about the little things. It's understanding the population, and it's involving them in every single process of their treatment. And it's giving them a voice of who they are. Because at the end of the day, I really, 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 really want them to think about, you know what, I matter. I belong here. And you know what, maybe I can finally start to heal.
So Christina, on that note, this is a question not on your list, but but you're making me think of interventions, right? So
Yeah.
one is creating the environment that is safe and protective, and they feel that, I can talk to you, I can trust you, right? Going back to that question that I asked Dr. Salisbury about creating a space of trust and safety in that assessment process. But that's the same thing in a residential facility. That's the same thing in an outpatient facility. How are we creating that safe space for trust? But the other question is around the interventions, the interventions that are being brought forward and introduced to these program models, no matter whether it's an outpatient
Right.
service or a residential. So can you speak on some of those interventions? And I, just because I know you, my understanding is that many of these interventions are validated and normed for girls in the justice system. So can you speak to what some of those models are?
Yeah, I will say, and I'm not just saying this because we're in a room full of state of Connecticut employees, but I will say that the state of Connecticut has done such a great job with vetting so many different programs for our girls, especially those coming from detention. And it is so incredibly paramount that not only the state, but the agencies take a look at what is the main goal. So if the goal is to start the healing and to start that process, okay, great. So let's work backwards to figure out how are we going to find the best interventions that fit that goal. So one of the interventions that I know I'm just maybe a little bit biased because Dr. Covington is on here, is utilization of even just down to voices, the voices curriculum. And that is such a profound curriculum. And if you're not familiar with it, I really, really challenge everybody in the room to go take a look at that, and how that curriculum is just paramount in establishing that foundation of elevating their voice. Literally, it has it in the name. So taking a look at things like voices, I know that state of Connecticut has before used Girls Circle. They have used a variety of other things. I know Target was used. Now I'm really dating myself in a lot of different ways, but the interventions have to be intentional, even down to especially residential programming in treatment interventions. And I know state of Connecticut adapted DBT in one of the programs that I oversee, and how that pairs with other models. A lot of times, and oftentimes we see, especially in residential programs, it's that sense of control that, okay, we have to control the behavior, we have to control the narrative, we have to control the outcome. But what happens if we really start thinking about, okay, maybe not the control, but that, again, that empowerment? So taking a look at models that are out there, one being TIER, that I also am trained in, and actually Kim Silvaggi was a co-author of, for residential treatment programs, because it does give them and elevate them in a different way to take back that control and that ownership. And we do see a lot in, especially myself, when I do go to different residential programs, that various models just aren't working for their kids. And there's constant AWOLs, or there's a lot of different recidivism. And it might not just be from staffing, but it has to do with the different interventions that are being used in the program that just aren't working for the population.
Thank you so much. I am now going to move over to Camilla and talk more about the system, how to kind of respond to some of Rep. Walker's question earlier about how the systems are responding to and creating services and interventions for our justice-involved girls. And Camilla, as a probation officer, a gender-responsive probation officer, how do you actively engage families or caregivers in your day-to-day work with clients?
Thank you for that question. As a probation officer working with juvenile clients, especially our female clients, family engagement is a pretty important component of our job, right? We're not just working with this girl, we're working with her entire family. We are thankfully a very well-trained group of people. For pre-service training, we receive over 300 hours of training. A lot of those trainings having to do with family engagement. So we train in motivational interviewing, child and family partnership, shrink-based approaches. And as a gender responsive officer, we receive additional training and the model for collaborative casework for women and girls, which has a very strong relational component to it as well. So to answer the question, really, family engagement starts on day one for us. When we conduct that initial intake interview, we're doing family engagement. When we are conducting our assessments, we're doing family engagement. We do a family mapping during that interview where we want to identify that girl's natural supports. And sometimes those supports can be blood related, sometimes they're not. We all know that family sometimes doesn't always mean blood related for our youth. So we do that in that initial intake interview, and we continue that family engagement throughout supervision as well. So we do periodic check-ins with the family. For our girls, we, as part of the collaborative casework model, we do teaming meetings periodically as well, which is a meeting that is driven solely by this girl. She gets to call the shots at this meeting. She gets to identify who is going to be a part of this meeting, who her supports are. And this meeting is also a very strength-based meeting. We are talking about her goals. We're talking about everything she's accomplished so far and all the goals she plans on accomplishing next. And because she has that control of who gets to be a part of this, she is more motivated to succeed based on that support. So family engagement is a component that we maintain throughout the entire process.
So Camilla, continuing that conversation about family engagement, right? As however that young person defines it, we know that family dynamics are very complex. All right. And I could also see in those teaming meetings, so happy to hear you're still doing those, but those
Yes.
teaming meetings, how do you navigate those complex family dynamics? And as we know, as whether they're leaving from a residential facility or they're on community supervision, they're still in that home, right? So
Right.
how do you as a probation officer navigate these dynamics while still trying to maintain the connection and stability and trust with your client?
Right. That's another really good question. So, because we are working with young girls, we know we depend on those families. For that girl to be successful, we depend on that family dynamic to be an environment that she can thrive in, right? And we're not involved in their lives forever. We don't want them to depend on us moving forward. So, it's a fine line that we walk between being an advocate for what our client wants and identifying that sometimes the caregivers or the grown-ups in the house have conflict with this girl that is in our caseload. So we want to make sure that we are promoting positive relationships within the home. We want to make sure that we're making referrals for evidence-based practices that are working with the family as a whole. um, we understand that a lot of our parents come to us already with their own set of needs, their own past trauma, that they are in need of services themselves. So whether or not they're ready to work together, we make that determination. If that girl is not ready to work with her family on, an intensive in-home program, she can work on herself individually, and we can offer supports to the family separate from that. So we want to make sure that we are maintaining that level of support on both sides, and that the family is also receiving the support services that they need. And as far as like these toxic or complex dynamics, that's why teaming is the way that it is. The girl gets to decide who is a part of that team. So if she feels that a certain relationship is not going to be beneficial to her at this meeting, that person shouldn't be there. So we want to make sure that we honor that.
So here's a question not on your list as well, but as being a part working in a system where we are, as we saw in the report, the girls are involved, and then many of our girls are dually involved, right?
Right.
With DCF as well. So let's talk at the system level. Let's talk, taking that to be successful with her as a client and then with the family, right? We need to ensure that the multiple systems that are working with those families and with her are also collaborating, are also connecting, right? Are also doing their own teaming as to how to address the needs that are being faced by the family and her. So can you talk at that system level how juvenile probation, as well as Department of Children and Families and or Department of Corrections and or housing, any of these other systems are working together in sort of that teaming piece?
Absolutely. Because a lot of our girls come to us with multiple systems involved, it's very critical that we work together with those systems. So as a gender responsive probation officer with clients that have DCF involvement, I want to make sure that I am connecting with that DCF worker, that we're working together as a team to figure out what the best plan is, along with the collaboration between the family and the girl involved, right? We want to make sure that their voices are heard. And sometimes we want to make sure that we want to differentiate what issues are in front of us. Are we talking about a juvenile delinquency issue? Or are we talking about a child protection issue? Which player should be involved in a certain moment? So we want to make sure that we are collaborating and that we do come up with the best possible solution to address whatever needs are at play.
Thank you, and we'll be back to
Thank
you
you.
as well. We're now going to shift beyond the systems, right? And Tracy, want to ask you, what are some successful practices in our programming that you have seen when it comes to reentry and multiple system coordination for girls returning to their communities?
Okay, so I think that one of the things that actually works for girls that are coming home is warm handoffs, not cold referrals. I think that support should start before release. People should not be put at the end of the group list or anything else because they're not the concern because they're not leaving right now. I think that it should start the second that they become involved with the system. Reentry shouldn't wait. I understand OAP plans and things like that, and I think that those should be addressed immediately and not when they're close to their release. I also think they should continue seamlessly. I don't think that there should be anything that impedes them, disciplinary or any other reason to stop that successful reentry plan. And I think that we shouldn't stop saying, here's your number and good luck. I think that we should definitely be relationship centered. We should have trauma support. We should give girls an opportunity to open up because when they feel safe and they feel believed and not judged, right? Then that's when they're more willing to talk. Otherwise, they're not going to talk, and they're not going to heal. And we as providers need to stop using words like offender. We need to take that out of the system completely, not just for girls, but for everyone in the system. Because when you attach someone to one particular moment in their life, you're almost telling them right off the bat, I don't believe in you. You're reaffirming any negative messaging that they have heard throughout their life. And I think that we need to move to person first language. I definitely think that we should implement peer mentors with lived experience. For example, as I said earlier, I'm a formerly incarcerated woman. I spent 23 years incarcerated. I went in at the age 19 and I came home when I was turning 42. Today, I don't just have the lived experience, but I'm a Connecticut board certified peer support and recovery support professional. And I'm also a Samson Gaines Center certified trauma informed trainer. So girls trust people who have lived through the trauma and the reentry and the rebuilding. So we need more people that are like me to be able to work with these girls because we can teach them that even after they made a mistake and had justice involvement, I can say, today I am a wife, today I am a mother, today I have an absolute pardon. And this gives them hope so that they can turn their lives around and reintegrate successfully. Because sometimes they think, I did this, I'm part of this, and they got enough people pointing down at them and enough people mad at them and not willing to forgive them that they come up with a concept like I'm a piece of garbage and I'm just going to always be that way. But if you put someone before them like me or other peer support specialists or other people that are also trauma informed, right? Because we don't want to just throw people before them because they have lived experience. We want to make sure, because we could pass on the negative things that we learn without even realizing it. So when we're also educated on top of having lived experience, this is important, and this can help them turn their lives around and reintegrate successfully and become great parents and stop things like generational incarceration. That was part of my story. I went through a lot of childhood things that led me to want to join a gang, right? And people look at someone like that and they're like, oh, you just want to join a gang, you just want to do this, and they judge you and they don't look at you as somebody that may have things going on in their home. And I think that we need to have like creative identity building programming, like storytelling, leadership roles, create mentors, have the girls become mentors to other girls when they're doing good, because that is then they can become those people with lived experience right within the system, helping other people while they're in the system, and give them youth advisory boards so that they can, help advise to what they need while they're in the system. I think that we can help girls rewrite their negative messages that they've internalized, and we can rebuild their, excuse me, we can rebuild, it's funny that I said that right, well, rebuild their voice, and then that happens. And they can believe in themselves as a good person despite their past mistakes. And one other thing is I think we need family-centered reentry, like everyone here has been talking about. When the family stabilizes, the girl stabilizes. And for adults returning home, we must actively support mothers in reconnecting them with their children and rebuilding bonds with their without unnecessary barriers. And so I think that a lot of what happens with the system is it breaks down the family unit. And I think we shouldn't push people to go to family that is not good for them either, just because they're family. So yeah.
And thank you for saying that. And I see a lot of chat too around the peer-to-peer, and that's such a critical, right? That peer mentor, critical sort of component to this work or this experience, right? Where she feels, when we go back to the relationship, that trust and knowing that the person that's maybe sitting in front of them has had that experience too, maybe has walked in their shoes. And so, I know that Connecticut has invested in quite a bit around peer-to-peer, but we need more. Or, I know that there's multiple, through this work, we've heard of, behind the wall navigators. I think OPP does this. We've heard about the judicial branch, the peer-to-peer mentors or the credible messengers, right? There's so many other terms there, credible messengers, navigators, reentry navigators, and so forth. And so I guess a question that I have, and this was not on your list, a question that I have is, how can we, when we talk about the multiple systems that are involved in, have contact with our girls, and as they are re-entering back into the community, right? Some of the critical areas that we know that prevent recidivism, education, right? Housing stability, health care, right? Job, employment, and so forth. And so I'm wondering, how can we, as a, what are those, how can we strengthen those systems? What do you see as areas that need to be strengthened for all those components? And this might be a little tricky question. How can we utilize those peer-to-peer or those navigators, those credible messengers, to learn from them? Because they're now in a space like you are. You are now in a space of advocating. You're in a space, you're an executive director of your own organization. You've built yourself. And so how can we work with individuals who have had that lived experience, go through this peer-to-peer navigator or credible messenger, becomes a certified and so forth, and learn from them, and to help improve these systems of education, of housing, of healthcare, and so forth? How do we do that?
I guess a lot like the way that I was helped, Community Partners in Action. That's my day job. I'm not here in that capacity today, but they had a program called the Resettlement Program, and they actually visited me while I was incarcerated, and then they followed me home, and then they helped me get successful. And they didn't just help me get successful as an incarcerated person. When it came time, they put their money where their mouth was, and they actually hired me as their colleague, right? And so I think that all comes with actually believing in the people that you're helping. And I think so for housing is the most important thing. With the people that I work with adults, but housing is the most important thing, because if you don't have housing, you don't, a designated safe place, it's not optional. It's a foundation for everything. And we can't talk about reentry or healing or stability if a person is sent back to a slum. We shouldn't just be able to rent a slum, or, and those kind of things will be more with the adult women than the younger women. But we should be able to have safe and stable housing, right? And I think, if we have more peer support specialists and more people like that, then we're giving people an actual chance to use their lived experience to actually be employed, to take care of themselves, to take care of their families. And in a lot of other areas of I'm blessed that I found the reentry field, because I don't know what I would have been, because there are no laws against discrimination on people based on their record. So regular people, in the name of protecting whatever business they built, they could say, no, I'm not hiring you. No. And it's the same thing for these young girls that are going to be going into, into employment and stuff. If they're at the point where they're still on probation or things like that, that could also impair their ability to get a job. And if you can't get a job, there goes your self-esteem, because now you can't support yourself. Now you got to beg for $5. Now you got to, and so
for me, these things all go together, but I think that we definitely need to, and I think schools are doing a good job of really embracing non-traditional students today. I think that that's good. I think that, credit loss, that's something where you're getting credit and then you come home and you can't, you're getting whatever is offered while you're there, and then there's not, so I think that those things, but those are like small things. I think it's more about relationships, more about person first language. I mean, with and across the line, and people can't tolerate it for, like we have this policy that you can't do it, but in practice it's totally different, right? So we have to be able to be like, I'm at my job, I'm a equity ambassador. We need that. We need people in those lines to make sure that people are toeing the line. People are not falling outside of that, and people need to be held accountable, because you could push somebody to suicide just by the way that you speak, right? Words are so powerful. So for me, I think we need to definitely address housing, like you said. I think that, we need to push for people to get educated, but be able to show them examples of people that have been in their shoes and who have now gotten educated. I mean, some of my peers, people that are formerly incarcerated, one is a sergeant now in the police force. One is two actually are doctors. Like, you could become anything you want. And what we see, when people are released from incarceration, we tell them that, oh, there's no excuse. There's so many jobs out there, this and that. But we don't tell them, like, there's a million people that are going to look at you and say no. There's a million people that you're going to try to get an apartment. They're going to say no. You're going to try to I once tried to go online to try to adopt a pet. I have 8 cats now and a dog, but I tried to adopt. And one of the questions was, do you have a record? And I was like, so now part of my organization also, I help people rehome. Yes. So basically what I'm saying is we also have to talk to our communities, right? We have to talk to just the general lay people around us. Anytime we meet a formerly incarcerated person that is successful, they're changing the narrative, but we have to spread the word. We have to help change the narrative. We have to also, like CPA did with me, put our money where our mouth is and give people an opportunity, because I'll tell you, formerly incarcerated people, we know every time, now I don't, but because I have a pardon, but we know every time we go somewhere, we have to disclose, right? So we're going to do our best to keep that job so that we can move up within your company or your place. And we need to spread those words, because if we don't share our own experience with just general people and not just other providers and preach to choirs, we need to preach to people that are non-believers, people that think, oh, they went to jail, they're a piece of crap. We have to change that stigma ourselves. And so for me, that's the best that I can answer that question.
Great. Thank you so much. And you elevated the conversation to policy. So I'm going to go there now, and I'm going to bring back Dr. Stephanie and Dr. Salisbury to the conversation. And looking at policies across, the country of, and some of the reform efforts that you've seen, what practices should be eliminated, or what policies should be eliminated because they feel harmful, and what policies would better support girls' stability and well-being?
Well, there's so many policies that are in place because they were designed for males in the justice system, and then they have been used in juvenile justice and used with women and girls. Primarily, and I keep thinking about Connecticut a lot because I worked with you for a number of years on this. You have, well, your research at Washington Street Girls Detention years ago shows you what you have to get rid of. And in that facility, you changed how you ran the facility by reducing the use of restraints and seclusion. And you changed the safety of that facility by doing that. And so you already have a model based on your own research about policy changes that need to be made. you also, we've heard the word relationship. I've used it, Emily's used it, it's been used a number of times. Judith Herman said that trauma was the disease of disconnection, which tells us what's really important is relationship. And if we can develop continuity, we talk sometimes continuity of care. I prefer to talk about continuity of relationship. And this idea that a young woman, when she's in your care having services, has a relationship. It could either be with a peer or it could be with a slightly older peer. It could be with a older adult but not too old, that follows her and stays connected with her over time. So there's a continuity of relationship. I think the other thing in terms of policies and practices, again, I'm thinking about your history, that I think as you're moving forward, it's important for you to step back and say, what happened to us? We use that terminology with people all the time to think about not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. But what happened to you as a system? That you were on a path and you took a detour. So what happened? I know it was a change of administrations, but that means something was not ingrained, it was not embedded in your system. So this time you're back on the path, you're talking about this again. How do you get gender responsive services that are trauma informed, culturally relevant, in place in a way that is how Connecticut handles your youth? And I think you could perhaps learn from your own history. So those are some of the things that, you're an interesting state to me. I've worked in lots of places. You're an interesting state. You're small. You have resources. You have financial resources. You have workforce resources. You have intellectual resources. You have a lot going for you. Other states are suffering. You really aren't. And so how can you take this kind of wealth of information, knowledge, and now intention, and really get this embedded in your system in a meaningful way that can't just change every time there's an administrative change?
Thank you, Dr. Covington. Dr. Salisbury, I'd like to give you the same question. And also in the sense of, as you talked earlier about assessments, policies. So what practices should be eliminated because they feel harmful? What policies would better support growth, stability, and well-being? And then I would add there, what should we be considering as a policy for our assessments?
Yeah. So again, I'll come back to this idea of, framing everything around risk becomes a real issue when we're thinking about policy, right? The risk need responsivity paradigm absolutely changed the way we did operations, of course, for the better, for many, many decades. But again, that model is based off of justice involved boys and justice involved men. If we were to take a look at where gender and race actually end up in that model, they end up in a specific responsivity bucket and never really to be looked at again, as if they are barriers to my success in treatment, for those of you that know the R&R model well. And so because funding streams are based off of the R&R model, because our policies are based off of that, right? I would argue that we really need to think about how policies really need to look different, of course, for justice involved girls, and how we can create better outcomes for them and their families. I also think we need to consider the fact that, girls are just motivated differently by an ethic of care and an ethic of relationships that we've mentioned before, as opposed to an ethic of justice, which is oftentimes, and rules. And the reason I'm talking about that is just because when we talk about residential, policies around behavior modification and interventions, these have to be at the forefront of the kinds of interventions, of course, that we have. And so at the end of the day, right, what doesn't get assessed is never going to get addressed. So if you don't have, for instance, unhealthy intimate relationships on an assessment tool, that becomes a problem. And anything also that doesn't get codified right into policy, but is not necessarily right, like it's just written down somewhere, but not necessarily, put into practice. If it's not legislatively mandated, if it's not part of the ARs or statute, I have just seen over and over and over again. I've been in a lot of systems, and Stephanie and I are exhausted. If things don't get codified, we keep having to come back to systems because girls and girls of color are oftentimes dismissed and ignored when the next fiscal crisis comes.
Thank you. I have, I'm going to go to Christina, but then I'm going to come back to Dr. Stephanie Covington and Dr. Emily Salisbury as well about this question. I'm going to, Christina, there was mentioned in not just now, but even earlier with Tracy around practices like restraint, isolation, strict rules, in facilities. What are sort of the rules as you work in residential programming or in facilities? What practices like restraint, isolation, or strict rules impact the safety? And can you give an example of what sort of policies you have in your program around restraints and isolation?
No, absolutely. So in terms of the rules and structure, we always like to really ensure that the milieu is incredibly strength based, and I know that the trauma informed, right? Everything is trauma informed, like Dr. Covington had said, but really elevating their voice. So when it comes to rules, we're really redefining what rules are, and we're aligning that with, instead of rules, the expectations. So it really comes down to a lot of the language. We're transforming, and I'm going to go back to what I had said before. It's not necessarily about compliance. We want to kind of take away that whole notion of compliance. Our goal should always be long-term change. Our goal should always be, how is it that we can ensure that our kids are getting exactly what it is that they need, and not just short-term compliance, or, oh, you're gonna get in trouble if you didn't do X, Y, and Z. We also want to make sure that our interventions, like we had talked about before, are very intentional and definitely more meaningful. So we have to want to continue to evolve in that. So in terms of anything that comes with isolation or and we don't do that. That's not something that we do. That's not something that we believe in. The isolation piece does not that's not even at the forefront of my mind, and I think I would have quite a few heart attacks if I ever walked in one of my programs and that was a thing. So that's not an option. That's not even an option. I think oftentimes too, people get in this notion of, oh, I need this control. Like, I need this control over this population in this milieu. So, you know what, you're in trouble for this, or you're in trouble for that, instead of really taking the time to look beyond the behavior. So what is that behavior trying to tell us? What is she trying to say? We all know about the frontal lobe. They're not going to be able to say, hey, it's not developed yet. I know this is what I'm feeling. This sometimes is going to come out in emotion, and we have to be responsible for trying to figure that out and providing them that supportive care. So in terms of just the structure and sustainability, nope, the isolation doesn't occur. But we really do try to create this more empowering environment for them to utilize their voice.
Thank you so much. And so, really, big picture, the type of programming, right, that is I'm going to age myself as well, motivational, behavioral health, behavioral management programs within the programming arena of residentials. The question I have for Dr. Stephanie Covington is around, again, facilities and programming. And so, in our report and in the work that we did this past year, take us to the deepest part of our system, incarceration and York. And we have at any given time one girl at York under the age of 18. How do we program? And by the way, if you go back to that report, that section of the report and that slide, sorry, what is that slide? I just have to make this point. Unsentenced. Where is it? Sorry, give me 1 minute. 15, okay.
Yep. Oh, no, John.
Oh, here we go. All girls, right? This is one of the data highlights. All girls admitted to York Correctional Institute between 22 and 24 were unsentenced with a mean length of stay of 56 days. Unsentenced 56 days at York. And at any given time, the average was one girl. How much money is being spent on a facility housing one girl? And then how do we program for one girl?
Well, I'd step back. I don't believe that any youth should be in an adult system. And so to have girls under the age of 18 in your adult women's prison I think that would be something I would start with. The second thing is, because of the way it's set up, when youth come in, they can't be with anyone over 18. So now you have this very small population. I understand why the rule is there, because you don't want the young women to be harmed or whatever by these older prison residents. However, you're also missing their wisdom, their kindness, their ability to create connection. And so I think you have to really rethink where girls are going. I mean, to put as Christine was saying, in her residential program, she wouldn't do isolation, but now we have isolation in the prison system because we've got one girl. Erica, I don't know how it can work. You know, there's a question, even in other jurisdictions, we're talking about how we're programming the 18 to 24-year-olds because they need programming that's more designed for them, but often the programming for the adult women isn't the most appropriate. They can certainly be in it, but they don't engage in the same way. So for the young women under 18, I don't think being in an adult prison is where they need to be to begin with. And the other question is, and this was also research that was done, you were one of the states that did a lot of research on girls and status offenses in the beginning. And girls on and the kinds of punishments they get and why they get overly punished in their punishments compared to the boys. You know, it's like women with nonviolent offenses shouldn't be in a correctional facility either. It's really rethinking how you use these custodial settings and who needs to be there and who does not need to be there. And what are the other options? I think that I just think they're a mistake. They're a leftover. And I think that's part of the difficulty. Our criminal justice, I hate even calling it the criminal justice system, the criminal legal system, because I think often we don't see much justice. But I think this system needs to totally be relooked at in terms of what should it be doing and how can we do it and can we do it better? It all just needs to be transformed and totally rethought.
Thank you. Before I open it up to the larger audience, I'm going to one more area of data highlight, and then okay, Rep. Walker, go ahead.
Before we move on, I first of all, we all up here have scratch on everything. We've written them. I just quickly, training doesn't change culture. Love that. Trauma is a disease of disconnection. Love that. Talking about institutions and what we were just discussing, when we first started doing Raise the Age, one of the things that was there was incarcerating children because they didn't go to school. Do you remember that? I remember Tony Harp looking at me and saying, "Are you kidding me?" So the thing that I'm thinking about right now, when a child is in a girls' facility, residential, DCF, the child runs away, what happens? The child gets arrested. What's the difference between sending them to prison for not going to school or arresting them because they're adolescents and they're running? We've got to look at these laws and we've got to look at the structure. So I just wanted to say that we have to change. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am going to open it up. I'm just one more area of data spotlight that I want Dr. Stephanie Covington and Emily Salisbury to maybe touch on, which we haven't really emphasized. Actually, there's two that we really haven't emphasized in our Q&A here. Trafficking. And just like, and how strongly I feel about the fact that we should not be incarcerating at any given time one single female at York, and that we can and should make a change there. I also feel that we have an opportunity here, and we have talked, Connecticut has talked for many years and has done a lot of work around trafficking, but we are still at 94% of identified human trafficking victims in the greater Hartford region were girls. Human trafficking reports have increased 200% since 2022. Girls are the primary recipients of trafficking reported and consulted made by DCF Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team, HART. DCF HART completed over 230 consults in 2025 alone, all around human trafficking. So what do we do?
I wish I had a simple answer for you. This issue is huge. I've had not a lot of experience with this, but I've talked to some girls who've had the experience of trafficking. And the part for me that's been hardest to wrap my mind around is often when they're given an opportunity to get out, they don't take it. They go back. And when I listen to the stories, there are essentially two themes that I hear. One is the economics, and the other one is relationship. That while we would see these relationships as not being positive, for some girls, they're the most connected they've ever felt in their lives. And so we have to look underneath, again, behavior, and to see what is not only motivating this, besides the fact of also being stuck and being afraid to leave, and what can ensue. But I don't have any simple answers for you on this one. I think this is a huge, really social problem for us as a country to look at, and what it means for young girls to be both at risk and having difficulty getting out.
Yeah, if I may, when I started studying this in 2012, people essentially said, "Why are you studying this? This is a boutique topic. This isn't a thing. This is, too highly hyped up, not really happening." And of course, look where we are today. At the request of a county system, a juvenile justice system, when I used to teach at Portland State University in Oregon, I worked with Clark County, which is in Washington State, just over the border of Oregon, and created an identification and diversion protocol specifically for girls who were being sex trafficked, commercial sexual exploitation. And it was a really simple model that the state of Washington actually picked up, ran with, and I haven't kept up with it because I have too many other things going on, of course, but that model has turned out to be really, really productive for their system. And so I'd say take a look at that particular intervention. We essentially had so many girls coming in on masking charges, right? It looks like they are prostitutes. Of course, they aren't prostitutes. They can't consent to anything. And really delivered a training protocol to start asking better questions in juvenile justice about why she's coming in with her nails done, the expensive jeans, right? Why does she have hotel keys, condoms? It's obvious to many of us if you're just looking. So I think I'd be happy to talk more about that on another call.
Thank you so much, and we will definitely be taking you up on that. I want to open it up to the team now. Any of the members of the committee who would have any questions for our panelists?
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning still, sorry. I got a statement and then a question. One thing that I think that we really need to press on is parity. When it comes to mental health, when it comes to education, when it comes to vocational programs, when our youth, especially our young females, are in any kind of detention, the things that we get on the outside should be the same on the inside. They should not lose the ability to survive and to have the life skills and to have everything that is necessary, just because they're inside a detention center, or just because they're incarcerated, or just because they're foster care. There's such a disparity with parity, I guess you can say. And I think that that's some things that we have to focus on, making sure that we change the dynamics. And there's been discussion in regards to being educated just like you go to high school, not just giving little bits of classes, but being able to learn the things that they learn in high school. Vocation programs inside detention centers. Yeah, is it going to cost us? Yeah, but it costs us more when we don't. And we need to really get that mindset, because we don't do that to make our kids successful for the problems that are created in the system, because the system creates problems that make our kids worse sometimes. And then my other question, or our question was, we have a lot of proven strategies that the gender response talks about. How are we tracking the data to see if we are increasing the proving strategies to make sure we have enough of them throughout the state to make sure our kids in not just a few areas, but many areas are receiving what's needed to better themselves?
Yeah, and thank you. And what I hear from that, and I'll ask any of the, agencies specifically to answer that question as well. But what I'm also hearing is sort of this performance accountability, right? What are the positive outcomes, or what are the outcomes that we're seeing? And also sort of embedded in that is this quality assurance process in place to ensure that you're not just evaluating a program or a model, right? Once every so many years, there is a cyclical cycle that's happening regularly, and you're using that information to make decisions about changes to any practices or any models, right? Or the interventions and to address the needs of the gaps that we're seeing. But to any of the state agencies, in the sense that they're here, what are some of those measures? Yeah, Tasha.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. Within juvenile probation, as Camilla shared with you today, our transition and adoption of a new model, assessment, supervision model, really allowed us to look at how do we build in the quality assurance that comes along with that model. And so we have, a very robust process for looking at fidelity to the model. But what we found when we were implementing that tool, and the question that came up today around how do we get here, what happened, we couldn't really tell the story of, that gap. And so as we were implementing this new model, and implementing the quality assurance piece, we also challenged ourselves to come up with ways to better describe, the profile of girls who are coming into our system. And so we do have data systems in place, a dashboard that is still new, but we're test driving it out. But it's helping us better understand the pathway in, just the experiences, the services, what we are seeing with respect to our assessments, including, not just risk and needs, but the trauma piece. And so I think just building that within the system is helpful so that we can speak specifically to what our data is telling us, in addition to what our officers are experiencing in their conversations and interactions with youth.
Christina?
Thank you. I have a comment and a question. I want to highlight, and I think there is some, this is in the report, but I sort of want to draw it out for us, which is the intersection between our kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system and our other systems. And to really frame that as an issue of failure to meet the needs of children early, right? We have girls generally are waiting twice as long to get into a psychiatric residential treatment facility than boys are. They're waiting 80 days, which is kind of mind blowing when you think about what level of need it takes to need to be in a psychiatric residential treatment facility. They're waiting on average 80 days. Our girls that are in detention, the majority, generally, when we look at that data, the majority have child welfare involvement, either during that period or within the 12 months before. And so, and then of course we have the special education piece, right? So many of these girls have special education needs. And so I think my question is, are there places that have done a particularly good job of intervening early? How do we, identify the girls who are at risk when they're 8 and they have special education needs and they're coming to the attention of the child welfare system, or they're in need of mental health care? How do we identify them at that stage and provide really meaningful interventions to ensure that they are safe, that their mental health needs are met, and they're getting the education that they need in order to thrive? And so that's my question is, are there better models? Are there places that are doing a really good job with early intervention?
Dr. Covington or Dr. Salisbury, have you seen any of these models early or in other areas in the country?
Not in this country, no. The place where I have seen some of this is in the Scandinavian countries, places in the UK, where the schools have really taken on trying to assess young people earlier. And they're usually assessing through the lens of trauma, because the connection between trauma and mental health issues, the connection between trauma and learning difficulties. If we're really talking about prevention, we have to eliminate violence against children. But I totally agree that starting early on, but I haven't seen, maybe Emily, you have, I haven't seen any place that really is focusing at a very early age.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are not an early intervention, prevention-oriented society. I wish we were. The data are absolutely unequivocally supportive, of course, of early intervention models. I'd say you mentioned, foster care and child welfare. One of the best interventions is just in terms of interventions that I've seen is treatment foster care, or what used to be called multidimensional treatment foster care. I believe it came out of the state of Oregon. Again, it's something to look at. I'm not sure if that's, of course, embedded in your system, but I couldn't agree more that we need to think about how girls are straddling so many systems. And it takes, a commission, it takes a task force to really take a hard look at just how many are straddling and what are the system needs that of course need to change. But yeah, we are not an early intervention society. It's really, really difficult to push through in policy.
Sorry, I see Rep Nolan again and then Tracy. Vinny. Okay, Vinny, Nolan, Tracy.
Is it okay? I just wanted to respond to some of that. So yeah, from DCF, I can absolutely attest to the fact that, yeah, many of the kids that come into our attention obviously have been through significant trauma. And that's something that we're constantly wrestling with as a society, as an agency, on how to handle these kids that have been through so much. I just wanted to point out a couple things on the prevention front. I think as of late, we've really tried to build up our prevention networks. We have a new program called Community Pathways that's been in effect in about 2 years now. We're still building it up. It came from the Family First Prevention Act that allows states to look at preventive models and try to get federal reimbursements for those programs to prevent kids from a number of issues, right? Prevent kids from going into child welfare systems, prevent kids from going into the JJ systems, prevent kids from falling deeper into the behavioral health system. So that Community Pathways is a public act. It's accessible to all public, as I think as folks here know. DCF, we are the agency within the state that covers child behavioral health. And those behavioral health services are available for all kids. And so I just wanted to point that out, that there is that prevention model out there. And just on the topic, I heard the doctor raise the issue of therapeutic foster care. We've recently are looking at new models. For the longest time, we had a therapeutic foster care model that we felt wasn't delivering on the therapeutic pieces. And so we've been constantly trying to find new and better approaches and models. And we hope to have that new scope of service done shortly. And we'll be posting that in a little while. So I just wanted to point out some things that we are looking on, but it is a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge for us as an agency and as a state.
And if I just may real quick, the state of Utah has been really good about developing out youth services and a no wrong door approach, where wherever youth exist in systems is not a wrong door for the kinds of services that they and the family need. So I just would add, take a look at Utah as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, and then we're going to close it out. Right.
I just think there's one thing that hasn't been addressed. We're talking about what's preventatives, right? But one of the things that I think that I'm not sure how many holding cells are still in high schools in Connecticut, but there's also SROs. And I know in the school resource officers, and I understand that they're like there to, for good reasons, but at the same time, it could also lead to arrest within the schools. My stepdaughter, when she was in high school about 6 years ago, it was bus time, and her last class was study hall, and they were outside, and the buses came in to the parking lot. So they told them they had to move outside the school. And at the time we lived in New Britain. So she moved outside on the walkway. And then when the buses came, she needed her bus ride home. So she went back on school property, and they actually arrested her. They put her, because she got smart kept asking her name. He put her in a holding cell. She was 15 years old at the time, and they arrested her. It ended up getting thrown out, but like, we're teaching through these. And he said, if they call me, I'm making an arrest. So if we have to work on this system as well, because we're actually teaching kids, we're preparing them for prison instead of preparing them for college. So I just wanted to put that in.
Thank you so much. And I do want to close this out because we are ending at 12. And so just want to make a couple of sort of highlights based on this conversation today. And I do want to thank our panelists, and thank you, Dr. Covington. I know you're all the way in California, so the time change, and I really appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you and Dr. Salisbury as well in the future in this work. And I want to thank all of our panelists. Great job. I also want to thank Ryan, who is our provost assistant, and she has done just an amazing job of not only writing this report, reviewing the data, working with the state agencies and the work group, but I'm also very proud to say that she will be a new full-time member of the Tau Youth Justice Institute team. And she will be working, actually transitioning from JJPOC to TCB, the Children's Behavioral Health Policy Committee. Well, she's being flexible. But I want a couple things I want to say, again, with all my gratitude to everybody, to the chairs of the work group, to the subgroup chairs as well. But what this report makes it clear is that that girls in our system are not failing. We are failing them. Girls enter the child welfare and juvenile justice system with significantly higher rates of trauma, mental health needs, and histories of abuse, yet too often, significant trauma, mental health needs, and histories of abuse, yet too often encounter systems that are not designed to meet those realities. What we learned through this report is the overrepresentation of girls of color, girls with disabilities, LGBTQ+ youth, which underscores the inequities that are deeply embedded in how services are designed and delivered. What we also learned in this report is that 94% of our girls are identified as being victims of human trafficking. This work is not just about girls also. I want to expand this language. When we build systems that are trauma-informed, relationship-centered, and responsive to the most complex needs, we raise the standards of care for all youth. Improving services for girls is not a niche investment. It is a system-wide strategy. If we get this right for girls, we will get this right for all of our youth in the justice system. Connecticut has led before. We have models that work, community-based alternatives to incarceration, gender-responsive programming, and cross-agency collaboration is so critical. Now is the time for legislators and state agencies to act decisively, to invest in sustainable funding, to require, as it was noted earlier, through legislation, cross-system alignment and to set measurable outcomes, and to ensure that every girl, regardless of race, identity, or system involvement, has access to the services she needs to heal and thrive. This report is not the conclusion of this work. It is a call to action. The question before us is no longer what girls need. We know that. We know what we need, what they need. We know the profile of our girls coming in. The question is whether we are willing to build a system that is truly deliverable and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Erica, thank you for a fantastic panel. And I just want to add on to what you said. I just don't want to hear anymore. We can't. I can't tell you how hard it is to hear. We can't do this. It takes too much. This is a system that was here. All of that has to go out the door. It can no longer be, we can't. We just have to figure out how and where and who. Thank you.